Hello everyone, and welcome to our latest webinar, Hints and Tips on the Canon C300 Mark II. Thanks for joining us. My name is Rob Newton, I'm Marketing Manager here at Visual Impact, and I'm your host for this session. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Simeon Quarrie, Storyteller, Director and Canon Ambassador. Hello Simon.
Simeon, no, that's
sorry.
Right. No, that's fine. I had a spelling mistake at birth, so that essentially means that I've been stuck with an E inside the name. So it's all good. Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. No worries at all. Simeon has 15 years experience in video production and creative storytelling, both as a photographer and cinematographer. So great experience. His clients include Canon, Barclays, TEDx, Unilever, you name it, you've got it. So it's great to have him here today to share his vast knowledge and experience. Before we get started, I just want to go through some housekeeping really. On your screens there's a question box. Please use it. We want to make the presentation as engaging as possible, and so please ask plenty of questions. And as I say, Simeon is here for you to, to answer everything you need to know about this camera, so please fire away all the way through the presentation. Don't wait until the end. We will be recording the webinar and we'll send you a link tomorrow, so if you want to listen to it all again, then you can do, which is good news if you want to send it to colleagues or wherever. You may not know, but Visual Impact actually run open days, masterclasses and product launches in Teddington where you can actually get your hands on the kit. And if you want to do that, you can check out our website www.visuals.co.uk for the details. Just one more thing, I just want to do an audience poll, if that's okay. This will help Simeon adapt his presentation to the profile of the audience and the people we have out there. So if you probably see now, the question is, have you made the leap to 4K recording yet? So there's various options you can choose. Yes, already there. No, but almost there. No, but we need to, and not sure if it's for me. So if you wouldn't mind just clicking on there, and the next few moments, and then we can have a look and see everyone. We've actually got a good mixture actually. Sometimes it's very much biased towards one or the other, but we've got a clear leader in terms of no, but we need to, and I think most people have voted. So if you keep on hitting away, and then we'll start in a few seconds, and as I say, it'll allow Simeon to get, judge the presentation just at the right level. So yeah, as I say, I've got a good mixture. Even quite a few say not convinced of the benefits yet, so that's quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely something we should discuss. The kind of the acquisition 4K, is it worth doing? It's definitely an interesting subject. And how we're looking on the polls here, just looking at this, we've got 25% that are already there, 20% saying no, but almost they haven't quite made the leap, need to, and then a few not convinced of the benefits. And I think I've been in all camps, if I'm honest with you. I've definitely been in all camps as a cinematographer. I am now at the stage where I am taking 4K very, very seriously. I mean, if I just give you a little bit of background into
Sure.
myself.
Yep.
I was working with video and also working with photo, and I started off in the wedding game essentially. That's really kind of how I got started with things. And over a period of time, I've then ended up being fortunate enough to move my work into the more commercial market.
Sure.
I knew from the beginning that what I wanted to do is I wanted to start off in a field where I could be very, very creative. And you wouldn't normally think of weddings as being something that was creative, but we pushed it. And we pushed it for both photo and we pushed it also for video. Then I started this transition because it's only natural that as a business you want to progress. And the team grew from me by myself to then having 2 and 3 and 4. And we now sit in an office in London, which is a great place to be, just on the South Bank. So if anyone wants to come and visit, please pay us a visit. And we work for various companies. We now work with a number of large businesses, from the likes of the Unilevers, the Canons, all sorts of people really, General Electric. So yeah. It's been a huge shift, and I think because of that shift from working with weddings, where I've been so familiar with DSLRs, I've then started to make a leap to bigger, larger cameras.
Sure.
And it's an evolution and a natural progression that I think that many go through. We find technology that is comfortable for us, and then we have to push our game. And I think that in some ways is one of the reasons why a number are moving to 4K. It's because people want to push things. Is there a necessity for 4K right now? I think actually as an editor, as a creator of content, I think that the answer is yes. It may be that we're not delivering yet in 4K.
Sure.
But on a 1080p timeline, we get it. There are the benefits of having things like stabilization without the loss of quality.
Yeah.
We're getting that from shooting at 4K. The ability to just to move the composition and crop things slightly, or to do slight rotations and slight tilts, knowing that we've got that quality there. I'm using that as a photographer. I get used to that. And now with video, I find myself wanting some of the same capabilities. And I think that's where 4K is great. And also, I don't know if many in the audience are actually shooting 4K, but playing back 4K, oh, it's an awesome experience. And I feel I don't want to go back.
Yeah.
I got hooked when I had the 1DC.
Right.
So I was one of the early adopters of the 1DC and really enjoy shooting with it. And actually now I still shoot with the 1DC and I still love it. So cameras like the C300 Mark II being 4K naturally caught my attention. The C100 Mark II is an awesome, great camera. And I think for a lot of productions, actually that suits what we would need, but I kept wanting to push things.
Yeah.
So for me, my investment has gone down the C300 Mark II route. So at this point, I'm going to put a hands up. I'm going to say I am a Canon ambassador, yes. I will shoot with other things if necessary, but I am not a Canon technical advisor. So I'm happy and open to speak about my own experiences with the camera, things that we found and kind of found useful as we've shot with it. We actually got the camera from the pre-production stage. When we were shooting with the C300, we got one early. And it's really interesting when you're using a camera that's not quite out yet. So you're kind of learning the quirks and the niggles, and then trying to understand what is it that's going to change over the period of time. And we got to give certain bits of feedback to get to the camera that we have today, which is a camera that I really, really like and really enjoy using.
It must have been great to be in that process right at the beginning, so you could say, well, this may work back in the factory, but in reality, we need to do this, this, and this to the camera.
Yeah, I think so. It was great. We got the camera. If I'm totally honest with you, we were not really meant to be shooting with it. We were going to be testing it. But what I decided to do is I decided to take the camera and I decided to organize 3 shoots over the 3 days that I had the camera. I did have Canon Europe breathing down my neck going, hey, you're shooting with the camera, you're doing a production with the camera. Hey, what? It's the best way to test the camera is by putting it in real life scenarios. Yeah. And we did that. We created some videos, not yet online, but they will be online over the next few weeks. We did one with an England hurdler, where we connected it up with the Movi. That was a really cool, fun project that we were able to do. We then also did a really cool shoot with some food, a macro shot, a macro shoot using slow motion, and we did another one with a footballer doing like sort of tricks. So we tried to break the camera over the period of the few weeks. We weren't able to break the camera, you'll be glad to hear. But there's a number of things that I kind of have grown to love about it. I guess it probably makes sense to go over some of the basic features.
Yeah, features, yeah.
And these are ones that come to my mind, and I'm sure people that are in the chat room can chime in as well. We've mentioned already that it's a 4K beast and a 4K animal. In order to be able to shoot that kind of quality and codec that the cards have had to change. So they've changed from being CFast cards, CF cards to being CFast 2 cards. So much higher data rate that they're able to cope with. It's able to do that with 2 card slots recording simultaneously at the same time. So that's great. The camera is also able to shoot C-Log and C-Log 2, which I'm talking there about the kind of the cinema gamuts there, where we're working with an expanded dynamic range, which is this interesting one of 15 stops of dynamic range. That is really cool, and a bit of a game changer for the market that this camera sits in. Yeah. Because when people look at this camera, naturally they're looking at the next cameras up, which, you know, people start to think of other types of cameras like the Alexa, for example. Very wide dynamic range, has got a great visual to it, and sometimes we're trying to get a look, a feel, and an aesthetic that is close to the big cameras without spending the same amount of money on it, yeah, but also having more flexibility in the way that we shoot.
Yeah.
And I think one of the flexibility issues that we were chatting about earlier is is autofocus.
Yes, that's a key feature, I guess.
I think it is, and for me, I think that is one of the biggest elements and items is the autofocus. That works extremely well. There are some other things that have also changed on here. So we had ND filters before, and if you look at the screen now, on the screen you'll just see the normal buttons just toward the lens that we're used to seeing ND filter. But a key element is that we are now able to expand these ND filters, and we're able to expand the ND so that they go up to 10 stops. So you go into the menu system, and you will have sort of, or by default, kind of 3 clicks and 3 changes. But when you do expanded, then you've got other options there, which means that you can then expand the range of those NDs. That's really cool. I found myself shooting at 1.2 outdoors. It gives us more creative options. I mean, look, on a camera like a 1DC and other options of cameras that are out there, you're often thinking about putting NDs on the front, having a matte box, slotting the NDs in, and then you are creatively trying to find, you know, the ways of utilizing that. But now, because it's in the camera, that's really useful, and just having those extra few stops makes a massive difference, because from a creativity point of view, you know, I love shallow depth of field. It's one of the reasons why many moved over to DSLRs, is because we love the shallow depth of field look. But then the moment we went outside, we still wanted to work with a shutter speed of say 50, and I would move it creatively to 125 if I was outdoors. That stage before we got to the staccato look. But then to compensate, what you would need to do is you would need to change your aperture, and very quickly you find yourself shooting at f10, you know, or f8, and it didn't have the creative look that we wanted. And now for me, thinking about my productions and thinking about the stories I want to tell and where I want to go, depth of field provides us with a really good way of creating or directing a viewer's attention towards something specific. And I think that's key, because as a director or a DOP or a solo shooter, we shoot, and it's our job to work out what do people want to see and what do they want to look at. And I have to encourage them in a particular way. Depth of field leaves us in a position to do that. But of course, as many will know here, you know, or listening into the webinar, the moment you go for shallow depth of field, focus becomes a freaking issue.
Yes. Which hopefully the autofocus will, you know, will aid and assist you in that area, because you say it's particularly when it's 4K and it's shallow depth of field, then the focus has to be spot on.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. You know, There are a number of ways of using the autofocus. Now, looking at the camera beside me here, we've got the option of having the selectable box, and when you actually switch the camera on, you've got a one push, like there's a button on there that you can press on the camera and it will lock onto focus. But what I do is I go into the menu system, change it to continuous focus. Yeah, that's key. Go into the menu, change the autofocus to continuous focus. Make sure that you have the autofocus engaged on the lens. And you get this square that appears on the screen, and wherever you have the square in the composition is where the focus will lock. But that box is movable. On previous iterations of like the C100, the C300, for example, that box has not been movable. It's been fixed in the center. And the feedback was, hey, this is great, this is cool, we're loving the autofocus, but please, Canon, come on, let us move the box around so that we could decide that we want to have focus on the left-hand side of the frame or have it on the right-hand side of the frame. They did something that was close to it by adding face recognition to the C100 Mark II. I'm going a bit geeky here. This is as geeky as it gets for me.
Right.
And they added the face recognition, and what that meant is that the autofocus would track outside of the center box. Yeah. But it wasn't something that you could actually physically move yourself. Now with the C300 Mark II, when I was using it, I take that box and I'm able to read the frame. I understand the composition that I'm looking for, and I'm able to then lock it onto center. Now this is great, and you've got things like a gimbal. So I was one of the early adopters of the Movi M10. Yes, and I can see your users wincing, going, hey, hasn't that dropped in price massively? Yeah, I was one of those people that paid like 15 grand. Hey, I made my money back on it, so I'm happy. But on that device, I went and I bought myself a Red Rock Micro, not the Red Rock Focus follow focus system. And on some cameras, you have to then use that. It becomes another person. But what we're able to do with the autofocus is I can keep the team smaller, and I can actually work by myself because I can use the autofocus even when it's on a gimbal device. When it's on a shoulder rig or I'm running it handheld, I use the nipple on the camera to enable me to move the actual focus point around, and I will do that whilst I'm shooting. So there's a nipple on the handle on the image that's on the screen. Annoyingly, I've got your lovely yellow visual impact label on the cable, just blocking the nipple that's on the hand grip there. Okay. But you literally move that around as you're shooting. So if you need to change your composition, you can do that. So this is where you've got this square box in the center of the frame. A little tip that I found is, if you look at the image that's on the screen now, you have got a jog wheel which is just got the markings there, select and set. Yeah, so if you look at button 5, ISO and gain, it's just to the right of that. When you've got autofocus engaged on an EF lens, if you turn that wheel, the focus box moves between the 4 quadrants of the screen. Top left, top right, bottom left.
So it's just on a sequence.
It's on a sequence.
Yeah.
That's really good, because sometimes you think, I don't need to use the nipple. I know I need to very quickly get from my focus from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen. Try that.
Yeah.
Go into your autofocus, then just make sure that you then try turning that jog wheel.
Sure. Yeah, we got a question here that said, is the autofocus passive or active?
So I'll try and interpret that. Autofocus works really well as a passive or active. Essentially, what it does is it's using the dual pixel AF. So it's looking at, yes, contrast. It will also understand the faces and the face structure, and it will keep up with focus. That's really, I use it very actively. So I'm running and gunning in many scenarios, and when I'm running and gunning, I am using that autofocus constantly, Katie. So it's that balance. I want a cinematic. How do you say it? Cinematic look.
Yeah.
Cinematographer can't say cinematic. I want that look, but I also want the benefits of autofocus.
Yeah.
And I know that many people are reluctant to use it, but boy, you need to try it. I was very, very surprised, and I went into environments when I was trying to really break it. Of course, like a photographer needs light on the subject in order to be able to pick up the face or to be able to pick up form and contrast, it works exactly the same. Yeah, you need to have some light.
Yeah.
So I had an image on screen. I'm not a massive PowerPoint lover, so I have very, very few slides. But there was an image I had on screen a second ago with the footballer Stephen there. And I had to alter the shot creatively just slightly in order to make sure that this shot worked. Now,
Yeah.
I had two side lights, very contrasty, and I added a slight fill light here to make sure that the camera was able to engage the autofocus, the face recognition, the facial tracking. So you have to think about that. You just make sure that it has that. Also, be careful of glasses. I tried that with glasses, and it worked most of the time. But then if someone has a really crazy set of glasses, it may not lock on.
Right.
And you have to be conscious of things. And I think what this does is it changes the way that we work. It gives us something to think about. So as well, I'm going for a shot, I'm thinking, okay, is there a face that it's going to track? Okay, the person has turned around. Is my focusing box in a good position to pick up the focus?
Yeah.
Because what you can do in the menu system is you can say to it, can you make sure that you have the face recognition, but then if it loses face recognition, can you please just use the box?
Yeah.
On to another thing here. I'm seeing some kind of questions about dynamic range here.
Okay.
So when it comes to the dynamic range, I love shooting the C-Log2. Of course, yes, you're right. It's connected to we've got some color space options there, like the BT709.
Yep.
Cinema, the Canon Cine sort of gamma as well. So we've got a few options. The key thing I would say is with the use of C-Log, use them as a creative decision. Yeah. I was under the impression that I was going to pick up the camera and I was going to shoot C-Log2 for everything. What I did find out was that actually the C-Log2 is best used in certain scenarios. Yeah. So you get this really gorgeous dynamic range, but there is a level of noise that happens in the shadow areas. And the way to work with C-Log2, and I've done some research and spoken to some colorists as well, it's so flexible in terms of how much you can manipulate the footage. But if you're going to shoot C-Log2, shoot slightly overexposed. So normally when you're shooting, you would shoot everything kind of center, 18% gray, and you'd push it over. Because what you need to do with C-Log2 is you need to shoot knowing that the dynamic range sits a lot in the highlights. And then when you grade it, you then bring down. Yeah, you bring down the blacks. And in that way, you end up, you end up really preserving the quality, but all the noise then goes.
Yep.
What I was doing when I first started shooting with it, I shot C-Log2. I was shooting in a low light environment, and like the one that you're seeing on screen here. And the first shots we were shooting, I was shooting them the way I would normally expose when I looked at the histogram. And you see here on this histogram, there's a lot in the low end, but now in the low end is where there is a reasonable amount of noise. Now, for those that use certain other cameras in the higher end, in the even higher end, you have to understand the way the codec, but the color space works. So with the C300 Mark II, you need to shoot exactly. Somebody mentioning it there. Yeah, with other cameras, sometimes you need to do that. You need to shoot with the Canon, you shoot overexposed and then you bring it down.
Yeah.
With the C-Log, I don't have that issue. I shoot it the way I see it. So in certain scenarios, it becomes a creative decision to decide what do you need to do with the footage? Do you want to grade it? How much do you want to do? And I think actually noise reduction is a tool that I will use if I really want to push it, because there's a lot in the high end. I mean, I did a shot, bright sunlight, harsh highlights bouncing off the water in central London, and there was still data there. I was really, really blown away.
Sure.
But when I was shooting low key, my initial thought was, oh gosh, this is not quite what I was expecting. And I did some research and then changed my perspective, changed it totally.
I guess it helps having the post-production experience as well as the shooting experience to be able to balance that.
Yeah, that is key. And I think in a way, you kind of touched on something. This is a codec that is designed. This is a codec that is designed for manipulation. That's what it's there for. It's there for people who are going to be grading, and because you want to get the most out of the footage, just kind of shooting 4K raw. There's that type of scenario. Also, there will be some differences between any noise rendition in 1080p. Like 1080p, I just notice it. It's just 4K because there's so much data there that Canon are giving you everything to play with, so you've got the maximum flexibility in post, and that's what the colorists absolutely love. Good. I'm glad you've got us back on the connection. Hang in there. It looks like the internet's good on our side, so we'll keep monitoring it. But it's great having so many of you following along with us. There are some other little practical things in terms of the way the camera is kind of designed. These are niggles that people had. The cables that kind of provide the data stream for the video, for the visuals, and also for the audio that connects to the screen on the top, the LCD screen on the top. They are now replaceable. So that is something that is that's really, really cool. Then the actual feel and form factor is fantastic as well, because the material is so much more robust than it was before, because this is a workhorse. Like when I spoke to rental houses, the C300 was something that was always out.
Yeah.
So this camera is designed for people that are going to be using this thing day in, day out. And then the thing is the camera is it's built like a brick. And I think that's where Canon put a lot of this investment is the fact that they think, right, this camera needs to stand the test of time. It also needs to be used in rugged environments. And this can be used as a camera that is docu style, but also be used as a camera that is used in a more controlled environment where you're going to set the native ISO at 800, which is what it is with the C300 Mark II. And you're going to set up all your lights in the correct way. You can use it either, and I think that's where the flexibility of this camera comes in. Good question. Okay, the Movi M10. Okay, so does it fit on the Movi M10? The answer is yes, but the answer is not perfectly. Yeah, we had to fiddle with it. What we were finding is the top viewfinder that you see in the image here. Take off the handle. The top viewfinder without the enlarged eye cap, it fits full rotation, but it can hit the bar and one of the axis points. Now with the old C300 Mark II, what a number did is they took off the viewfinder. So you go in, you flick up the EVF, so I should say the EVF, and you would unscrew it. It would look a bit ugly, but you then had full rotation. With this, I haven't found a way of doing it. So I'm looking at the camera now. You'll probably just hear me fiddling around with that. We haven't seen a way of disconnecting this EVF from the actual camera. And if maybe there's one screw there, but it doesn't look like that releases it. We need to have a bit more of a play with that. I don't know if anyone out there has tried doing that, has tried taking off the EVF. If you were able to take off the EVF with the smaller battery or the standard battery, then you would get good rotation. As it stands, we do have to change the way we operate the Movi M10 in terms of its positioning. We did some crazy shots with the Movi and the C300 Mark II. Absolutely loved it. It worked great, but not perfectly. Nothing to do with balance. It's just the size. It suits more of an M15 setup on the Movi. I've been trying to look if there's a ways of upgrading the M10 just to get higher. I need more height. I need more height, and I haven't found a way of modifying that yet. But please feel free to tweet me. Okay, Nick, great question. Was it okay editing with the XF ABC codec? When we first had the pre-production model, the only editing software that worked with it was Premiere. But I'm a Final Cut Pro man, because I love the speed that Final Cut Pro provides me. Now, I'm pleased to say that it does work. So I'm editing a project right now, and the team are editing with it in the office at the moment, which we shot on the C300 Mark II. We didn't even bother converting to ProRes. We are dropping the footage natively into Premiere or Final Cut Pro and doing an ingest of those MXF files, and I'm editing on a laptop and also editing on, I've got a 5K Retina, and it works absolutely, it edits really, really well. Also even the color manipulation, that works. Even DaVinci, that was the one that surprised me. I was thinking, right, I'm going to drop into DaVinci and I'm going to have problems when it comes to grading. I'm going to have to convert to ProRes, but it worked essentially natively. Sure, I can convert to ProRes in applications like Final Cut Pro, or I can throw all of the footage into Media Encoder and do it that way, but I've not needed to do that. So at the moment, I'm liking it as it is. I like to work quick, so the less processes I have to do for my business, in my mind, the more profit that I make, which is why it's so important for me to kind of get things in camera at the time. So I'm liking that. If I'm using an external recorder, Matt, at the moment I am using the Shogun, and what that's doing is I'm plugging that into the record out on the back of the camera, and that is giving me 4K RAW, but converting it over to essentially, well, it is converting it over to ProRes at the time. So I then get the ProRes. It works well. The ProRes is great to work with. One thing to bear in mind, and this is a hint tip stroke warning, is the record out when you're shooting 4K, it's giving you a 4K RAW. And now my recorder, the Shogun, it converts it into ProRes, but because it's RAW, I am getting C-Log 2, not getting C-Log, and I'm not getting, you know, Rec 709 or BT 2020. So just bear that in mind. That caught me a little bit off guard because of the output was essentially a RAW. We went, okay, sure, let's just go into the menus and settings and let us change it. In 4K, we had to output in that way. So that's just something to bear in mind, certainly. And is there another Final Cut Pro question there?
Yeah, was it FCPX, Final Cut Pro X?
Yeah, absolutely fine. And is it also possible to drop rushes in native into Final Cut? Yeah, absolutely, Lincoln. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm taking the footage and I'm dropping it straight into Final Cut Pro, and I'm editing it straight away. So could I use this as a same-day edit? Yes, sometimes we're working on productions where we're doing just that. We are filming and I am dropping the footage straight into editing software, and I could do that. Final Cut Pro 7, I've not tried it. Dude, come on, Steve, you should have moved on by now. let's see what other questions we got there. Hopefully that answers your question, Matt.
But we got one from William. Is the sensor oversized beyond Super 35?
No, so Super 35 or cropped in depending on what you are doing, which links slightly to Carl's question on the crop factor. Yeah, if you use slow motion, yeah, you've kind of got a 2 times crop factor. So that is a creative consideration. At first I was like, come on, why is it not full frame? But actually when I started looking at other cameras in the higher end, when you start increasing the frame rate, the crop starts to come in. It's just the way it needs to work and the area of the sensor that it needs to work with. So that works really well. Just be conscious that you will need to change your possibly change your lens creatively in order to be able to do that. Changing to slow motion as well is definitely another little consideration in the way that you do it. You need to change the recording mode. You'll just see this on screen now. Go into recording, media setup. You need to change the recording mode from normal. If you change it from normal to slow motion, then what you will get, you can kind of get a 2K flavor, which will give you 60p or 50. But then if you want to start increasing beyond that, what you need to do is you need to go slow and fast motion crop. Now, when you change it to crop, you then start to get other options like changing the frame rate. And it actually becomes you actually get to choose the number of frames. You go into special recording next. Yeah, so you go into special recording. The resolution will change to 1080p because this will not do 4K at 120 or 100 frames per second or 120 frames per second. Those higher frame rates are reserved for 1080p, and there are some options with 2K as well. So just bear in mind that change of slow motion is a 2-step change in the menu system. I would love it to be reduced and shortened down slightly in the menu system so it's easier to get to. That's definitely some feedback that I'll be providing Canon. I would love to make it easier to change between the two, but you need to change normal recording to a slow motion with crop, and then click on special recording, and in that special recording settings you can then choose your frame rate, and I think it toggles up in brackets or increments of 2 until you get to the frame rate that you want. Yeah, I would love it to be a single step, absolutely. It would make more sense to me as well, Carl, that it was just a little bit simpler in the menu system. But creatively, we managed to make this work for slow-mo. Quite a bad idea if all of a sudden you have to rethink all of your lenses. Hey, yeah, and it's also not the only camera that works in that mode. I would love it. I would love it all. Sure, I want a camera that is, I want a Phantom mixed in with the C300, but hey, you end up spending very, very different money. Can I shoot 1080p? 100% definitely. I did a really cool video of some food, which I'm going to get online soon. Jamie Oliver saw it and was blown away by it. It was slow motion with food dripping and moving around. The creative crop factor worked really, really well. Yeah, Jamie was loving that video, and hopefully he's going to be using that himself. So that'll be really cool. So there are lots of elements here that we can. In fact, here's a still of the food shop. Yeah, that kind of gives you an idea. It's an aesthetic that can really work very, very well from a creative point of view. It's just something that you need to be conscious of. Is that change of crop in? Does it mean that I can't proceed and create? No, it doesn't. I'm a blooming DOP. I'm capable of doing a conversion of the mil and kind of going, right, a 16 mil is going to give me this. We can make things work. That's our job, is to make those things work. it's great as well with the dynamic range to be able to shoot environments where you've got bright highlights as well as, you know, shadow detail. To be able to shoot indoors and be able to still see what's going on the outside from a creative point of view works very well for the purpose of storytelling. Will it change the way that I shoot? I think it will do, because I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to be doing a lot more with natural light as a result, because we've got that ability. And we've also got the ability to increase the ISO above 800 and still keep that level of dynamic range. So that is something that I'm really excited about using to create and define a look for myself as a cinematographer. And I think that's what we end up doing, is when we look at cameras, we are working out how does this fit and how does it suit my particular productions. And I've kind of shot with it in multiple different ways now to put it through its tests and paces, and I've used it on real life productions, from the hurdler that you see there on screen, where we were connecting it to a Movi, which the Movi was connected to the FreeFly Systems Mimic. It was a balance between a controlled shoot, it was natural light, and it was very fast moving, and I had 2 hours to make something that hit the mark. And when you see that video, it's got a very much a Nike-esque type of feel to it. When people have seen that video, I know we had a number who shoot on other platforms, and it has a look that is akin to what we consider to be the more high-end platforms like an Alexa. You know, it's got that kind of feel. And I think that's the thing I've absolutely loved about Canon, is that it's a camera that's about the look. The look is very, very important. Yeah, technical specs are one thing. Yeah, but the look for me is the thing that I pay for that makes the difference, to a point, because I don't have an unlimited budget. Like, I'm a small production company, so I want to get a look that works well, but the key is I also need to be able to move at speed. Now, there are always cheaper cameras on the market, and it's always going to be the case, but I have a balance between the cost of the camera, how easy it is to acquire the footage, and how easy is it for me to get the look, but then also how easy and quick is it for me to edit. And because the color science behind what Canon do is so strong, the moment I drop a clip on the timeline that has a LUT, I was chatting with August about this, a member of the visual impact team. You drop a clip on the timeline, you can add a LUT, and all of a sudden, bam, you are there. Yeah? The color science is amazing. Canon has been very, very strong with skin tones, and I'm shooting people. And whilst I have DaVinci, and whilst DaVinci is free, the quicker I can edit and put things together, the quicker I make money. So that's important for me. What drawbacks visually are there shooting on slower? Okay, so I think we're talking about what we would call ISO. Now, the native ISO is 800. However, I did find an interesting quirk. It's not really a quirk, but it wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting that ISO 800 would give me the cleanest image. Actually, shooting below 800 in some scenarios will give me an even cleaner image. So if I'm in a really low light environment where I have lighting control of lights, if I decrease the ISO, it's not adding more artifacts and noise. It's actually still like a DSLR camera. It's still reducing the amount of noise in any noise in the image. And then as traditional, the more you increase it, yeah, there's a little bit more noise that then starts to come in as you increase through the ISO range. There is, that's fine, Lincoln. There is an interesting one as well. Just do a bit of a test to see what ISOs you find the strongest, because the moment you go over 800, I found that I think it was ISO 1250 was stronger than ISO 1000. Yeah, so there are little things like that where you would either do it with a black cap on, yeah, or just look at the image when you get some time, cycle through the ISOs, and you may find that the noise ratio doesn't necessarily increase consistently as you'd expect. You might find that it goes up and then all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, this one is slightly lower. So if I need to shoot with a higher ISO, I'm actually going to go for ISO 1250 as opposed to 1000. So there are little things like that, like any camera, the thing that Canon's great at is that it works out of the box and you don't have to do much fiddling with it. You can get it out of the box and you can shoot with it, but still, like anything, the more time you spend with it, the more natural it becomes and you start to understand its personality, and the camera has a personality, one that I love. And there are also things that you creatively work around. Same with my wife. I love her dearly, but there are also things you go, oh, okay, I didn't realize that. So you start to play with it.
Yeah, I guess as well with the technology, you can get wrapped up in the technology for technology's sake sometimes. So as you say, if you concentrate on the images you're producing and how easy it is to get that image into post and then onto your client, those are the key factors rather than getting hecked up about various technical specs. It's got to do this, it's got to do that.
Absolutely, I think you're right. It's the key thing is I wanted a camera that gives me options. Not necessarily, I don't look for the cheapest camera. Sometimes, yes, cheap is the only thing I'm thinking about. But for me, a camera is not one of them. I earn my day-to-day living out of my camera. So there are things for me that make a difference. Autofocus made a difference to me. The shoot with the hurdler that you see on screen, I have a cyclist on a movie riding beside him, and we're shooting at 2.8, right? And I had no money for a focus puller because this was a personal project. I got it because of autofocus. These type of things have a knock-on effect that mean that I don't just look at the retail price. I'm looking at how much money is this camera going to save me down the line. And sometimes you save money at the time, but you pay for it later on because you then realize that actually shoot, I want to plug in the monitor so that I have a reference monitor, and I want to plug in something here, and then I want to have autofocus, and then damn it, by the time I add a matte box on and I start adding NDs on the front, well, there was money I was going to have to spend there, and it was also time that I was going to have to spend live on production making those changes. So I'm getting better at thinking down the line at what things are going to make a difference. One thing I'm looking at, I see William Edwards, a comment there from William. William's basically asked a question about the EF to PL. This is awesome to me because I love working with the Canon lenses because I can work with EF lenses. I shoot photography, and the EF lenses are great because they've got autofocus in them. They're not the most expensive lenses in the world, but the quality what Canon knows about and understands about lenses is something that's really, really important. The acquisition for me of clear, sharp images with nice characteristic, great bokeh, I've got that with EF lenses, but then also I've got the Cine primes. Cine primes do not carry autofocus. Yeah, so that's key, but they give you much more control when you actually start to add a follow focus onto the side and a really nice look. But PL mount gives me other options, and then as a DOP, there are times when I might want to put some Cooke lenses on there, yeah, or someone you're working with in a wider team might say, hey, can we put on some Zeiss lenses? There are options there, and options are something I love. So the camera can change between PL and EF mount. Canon can do that. They can make the change and the swap out. And I've read somewhere, and it was probably on a site like Newshooter, that Canon are bringing out an adapter or an ability, a kit to enable someone to change it from AF to PL themselves. So I've read that, and I need to ask some more questions about that. But that will be great because all of a sudden it just opens up the look, and I think there's a characteristic that comes with lenses, and I think at the moment there's this big push towards sharp, crisp imagery and lenses, but it's about character, and the character can come from your lens choices. Yeah. So yeah, that's something that I'm really excited about. I'm just looking through some of your questions here. We should probably throw this out to some question and answer as well. If I remember anything that I want to throw in an ad, then I'll do that. And where possible, I'll also just engage with some of these questions here. Workflow, there's a workflow question. Regards rushes, offload, backup. Yeah, oh man, that's a good question. So am I thinking differently with regard to the increased file sizes on location? The short answer is yes. So CFast cards are expensive, but they are not the most expensive thing now. I mean, I bought when the 1DC came out, shooting 4K into CF card, I was spending 600-700 quid on you know, what was it, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 128 gig, and spending sort of 600-700 quid on that CF memory card. Now CFast, it is cheaper than that. I think last couple of weeks ago, I spent about 500 quid on a memory card. I've also got a Shogun. Data, it can fill up depending on the type of shoot that you're doing. So if I was doing a docu in 4K, sure, I'm going to be really conscious of the amount of data that I'm collating. So what I use is I've got what make is it now? The Lexar hub. So I've got a Lexar hub which has got CFast card reader that I slot in there. And then I ingest onto some G Technology SSD drives. And I do that purely for speed, because at the moment, I have a confession, I have one CFast card. But what I do is the ingesting is so quick. I mean, a 128 gig card downloaded in under 10 minutes. That's really quick. And if
Impressive.
I've got like 50 gigs, I'm then ingesting that within a couple of minutes and then putting the card back in the camera. So I am conscious of it. I won't let it stop my work, because the creativity is about sometimes just going for it, embracing it. However, what I would say is I don't always need to shoot 4K. I've got the option. This camera in 1080p and 2K is nuts. So I can still do that, and I could then increase the bit rate to 12 bit, which gives me then options in color grading. I'm working on things like green screen. There are many applications where I would decide, you know something, for this, I don't need it to be 4K. But for me, I'm looking at certain projects, even where the client is not asking for 4K. And I'm thinking, you know something, this would look awesome in my portfolio, and I want it to be 4K because I have the 4K monitors, they're coming, they are here, and people are going to start playing them back. Vimeo is already 4K, YouTube is already 4K. And I remember what it was like when I was shooting SD and the change came to HD. And I imagine your audience would also remember that. You looked back at your portfolio and you kind of cried to yourself, because half of your footage, or nearly all your footage, was sitting in SD, and you went to plug it into an HD screen and it looked rubbish, right? And I have been there. So what I'm doing is I'm now making sure that key elements of my portfolio sit in 4K. Or if I'm going to shoot some stock or imagery that a client is likely to come back to in a year's time, in 2 years' time, and say, hey, Simeon, you know we had that footage that you acquired and captured on this particular project. Well, can you edit some of that footage into the shoot that we're doing next week? And I'm imagining that in a year's time, 2 years' time, that is going to be 4K. So I want to make sure that certain data acquisition, capturing footage, is going to be 4K now, because I'm thinking about the future. But I don't have to shoot in 4K. The camera in 1080p kind of rocks it out. Yeah. Can one set it up, the focus to a manual setting if I'm shooting? 100%. Okay, so Lincoln asked, can we use the camera in manual focus? Definitely. Manual focus is a way that many people would like to work, and it kind of leads me on to another element of the focusing that becomes very, very useful. Is you have got the ability to use autofocus, but use it with the focus guides. So when you are shooting in an environment like this that's on screen at the moment, here I had a focus puller. Actually I was doing it. But what I wanted that manual focus, I wanted it to breathe. Now what I would be able to do here is I would use the focus guides, which are indicators that show in the LCD screen and also in the EVF that tell me when something is in focus. And that's with an EF lens. So I'm using the information that's traveling between the lens and the camera, but instead of engaging the actual autofocus to do it for me, I'm using the information to tell me, Simeon, you're slightly soft. Rotate the lens left. Ah, got it. And when it's in focus, it then becomes green and the needles line up with one another. So that's the focus guides. And it's like an assist that's there that gives you feedback. So I'm thinking that that's something that is going to be really, really useful. I've tried using it on a few shoots. I'm preferring to call it focus confirmation. That's Simeon's name for it. Focus confirmation. I'm going to try and get Canon to change the name in the manual. I know they won't do it, but it gives me focus confirmation. Have I got it in focus? Yes, I have. And I'm still using manual, and I'm allowing the picture to breathe in and out. What I would say is also that you can set the speed of autofocus. Yeah, we've set the speed of autofocus so that it doesn't move. It can move quickly or it can move slowly. So it can breathe in and out. We should do another show on this, talking about the autofocus. But we'll let it breathe in and out so that it's not super responsive. Yeah, that nature is the responsiveness that's key. And all of those settings are there in the menu system where you can decide how you want the camera to respond. It's all about flexibility.
Yeah. Terrific. Okay, we need to wrap up in a couple of minutes. So
Awesome.
Is there anything else that you want to just cover quickly, Simeon, or I've more or less covered everything? If there's anyone got any questions, please put them in now. As I say, we will be wrapping up in a minute. So if you have any burning questions and you want them answered, please
I can try my best. Absolutely. I'm on Twitter and Instagram under Simeon Quarrie, so feel free to continue the conversation with regard to the this conversation on the camera. I think a final point I would love to point out: make sure that you modify the buttons on the camera. So go into the assignable buttons and change them. Make it your own. You see on the side of the camera here, button 1, 2, 3, 4, and you've got buttons on the nipple and buttons on the grip. These can all be assigned, and this makes life so much easier. Let's see if I can find the right image here, just to give you an idea of some of the things that are included. Okay, so for example, with the autofocus, I changed the button on the grip and I reassign that button so that I switch the tracking from, I have one shot AF, or I might decide that I'm going to switch face detection off. I can do that whilst I'm shooting. So that if I'm focused on a face, but then I want it to go to the focus box instead on the other side of the screen, I could press a button and do that. So I think the key is yeah, sure, the camera works out of the box, and Canon's cameras work out of the box like most other cameras don't. That's one of the strengths. However, I would definitely say make the camera your own. Modify the camera so that you change these buttons to things that mean something to you. So for me, I don't shoot with a zebra. So I would make sure that I would change that to something that was more meaningful for me. The crop factor on the special recording in slow-mo is about a 2. It kind of crops in 2, or it doubles. So it's just something that you need to be conscious of. I've actually found this to be a real help. We did a shoot with a macro lens. Oh, we were getting so much closer to the shot because of it. But we just swapped the lenses out. So if I'm on an 85, I change to a 35, and I get a similar feel. Sure, at the wider end, you have to be a little bit more conscious, definitely. I think the 11 to 24 is a hands down amazing when a lens with this camera, Super 35. There are so many options, and I think that's what Canon have tried to do, is give as many options as possible. I'm like everyone else here in this room. I want a camera that does absolutely everything. That camera to date does not exist. So what I'm looking for is a camera that gets me nearly everything that I'm looking for my day-to-day work. There are always specialist things where I will use a different camera, and we have different tools for different jobs. The key is to understand, what is this camera as a tool? What does it enable you to do? And get to back to the freaking story. That's what it's all about. In my mind, this year, Vida's hashtag is get back to the story. And yes, that's with regard to technology, but it's about getting out there and making something happen, and using the technology that's available to your advantage, and working in a good, quick, speedy, efficient way where we can bring the vision that we have in our mind to reality. Because that's the key thing, is actually, people, the technology is a major element, and I love companies like Canon for helping us do that. But the key thing that's really important is the creative honing of our craft, coming up with imaginative, good ideas, coming up with ways of telling stories, and then the technology should be subject to us. The technology should work for us to create that vision.
Yeah, and I guess to sum it up, really, what the C300 Mark II gives you is that ability to be as creative as you want, but without any technology barriers that are going to make it impossible, either cost-wise or resource-wise, to achieve what you really want in your storytelling.
Yes, I think the way I look at it is I think of the C300 Mark II as a bit of an all-rounder, because it fits into two spaces. It fits in the kind of cinematography. Say it again.
Cinematography.
Cinematic. That's the word. I'm going to practice that word. It fits in the cinematic realm. Absolutely. Shallow depth of field, the ability to have ND filters, but it's docu as well. I can put this camera on my shoulder. I can, with a shoulder rig, I can use it handheld with nothing, just using the top handle. And I can go out there and I can shoot. And I can shoot in environments where the light is low. Yeah. But I can also switch it to another mode where I change the way I work to becoming a very DOP-like person, where I'm going to set my ISO to 800 and I'm going to set up all my lights around it, and I'm going to now start to work with maybe manual focus, and I'm going to have a very considered shoot. It becomes that beast and that 4K animal as well, with the ability to shoot 4K raw. So for me, it's a really good all-rounder, which is why it makes sense for my business. I'm a Canon ambassador, but there are certain products that really resonate with me because it's what I need.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't buy every Canon camera, but the C300 Mark II is a camera that I have legitimately, I'm purchased, it's mine. I'm having it, it's waiting. When's it flipping coming? Yeah, so right, it's going to fit into my workflow in a really good, efficient way.
Perfect. Well, thanks for that. I think we've answered most of the questions. We will get back to you if there's any outstanding.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Also, we obviously will send you, as I say, a recording of this session, and hopefully some links to some imagery that Simeon has produced, so that you can understand more fully exactly what he was talking about. As I say, thanks for listening and joining in. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you again next time. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for listening, people. Thank you.